What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. Let me tell you, if your plants are looking green with algae and you're green with envy that your friend's seedlings don't have any algae and you want to prevent it, you want to figure out how to completely reduce it or not even get it in the first place, that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Let's go. So when it comes to algae forming on your seedlings, it does happen to everybody. In fact, it happens to us. So no matter if you're a beginning gardener or an advanced gardener, at some point, you'll get algae on your seedlings. Now, a lot of people write in asking if it's a bad thing for the seedlings. And the short answer is that yes, algae is a bad thing for your seedlings, and we'll talk about why in a little bit. But basically, algae is a sign that there's something environmentally wrong with the growing conditions of your seedlings. And so no matter what, we want to make sure that we reduce this or even prevent it altogether so that it doesn't occur. And if you do have it, it's starting to form, at least we stop its growth and keep it from getting even worse. All right, so the first reason why you're going to be getting algae on your seedlings is because the soil could be too compacted. Now, this all starts in the very beginning when you're starting your seedlings. If you take your soil and you're putting it into the containers and you're using plastic containers, the plastic pots don't breathe because they're made from plastic. And so if you compact the soil and you really pack it in there and you're just compacting and compacting and compacting, what's going to happen is it's going to actually reduce all of that air found in the soil. That is actually one of the biggest reasons why algae forms is a lack of air, but the lack of air doesn't just happen. It's a byproduct of having the soil too compacted. And so if you just keep packing this in here, yes, it is common to pack your seedlings slightly. We always recommend a loose packing. I always say press on the soil to pack it in, about the same that you'd press on your eyeball, right? So if you press on your eyeball, you want to press about as hard as it would be before it becomes uncomfortable. That's as hard as you want to pack in your soil in your trays. That way it doesn't compress the soil too much and reduce that air, because that's what's going to encourage things like algae to form. And so, because also when you compact your soil, that actually has another byproduct, and that's that water stays in the soil too long. Air gaps helps increase drainage. And if you don't have enough drainage, the soil is going to stay wet longer, and algae loves damp conditions. All right, the second reason why you might be getting algae on your seedlings is because you're using the wrong seed starting mix. Now, we always recommend starting with a seed starting mix that has a good amount of perlite. The reason why is perlite helps with drainage. Perlite also helps with aeration. And remember, aeration and drainage are the biggest reasons, they're the biggest contributing reasons why algae will form, because water will stay in your soil too long. And so if you have a good seed starting mix with lots of this white stuff, it looks like styrofoam, it's not styrofoam, it's an expanded volcanic rock. If you have lots of perlite, that will increase the fluffiness, increase the aeration, and increase basically the drainage in your soil to reduce things like algae. All right, the third reason why your seedlings could be getting algae on them is a lack of light. Algae thrives in low light environments, and that's because sun helps to dry out the soil. And so because algae thrives in damp soil, that's typically where you're going to find it first, is in those low light environments. Now, when it comes to seedlings in a grow room, a lot of people encounter algae with their grow rooms, and that's because their grow lights are just not as strong as they should be. And that's not a fault of yours, that's not a fault of your grow lights, that's a fault of the fact that grow lights are just not as strong as the sun is. And so the longer you have your plants in a grow room, the higher the chance that eventually something like algae will form, especially if your seedlings are being kept damp on a pretty regular basis. Because again, the lack of light combined with the dampness is what really encourages algae growth. Now, these seedlings were not planted in a grow room. So what caused it? They were in a greenhouse. That should be totally fine, right? Well, wrong. If you've got nothing but cloud cover like we've had here for the past 2 months, it's been just so cloudy. It's raining right now as we speak. There's just no sunlight whatsoever to be found. And so again, that will also encourage things like algae. So even in a greenhouse, you're not totally immune to algae growth, because it can still happen even in a greenhouse. And so that's the third biggest reason, and I would say is one of the bigger contributions to algae is just a lack of light. The fourth reason why you might be getting algae on your seedlings is you're just keeping them way too damp. Now, I've considered this killing your plants with kindness. Now, if you're someone that thinks that your plants are always dry, and even when they're not dry, you still have the fear that they're dry, you could be killing your plants with kindness. Now, as a beginning gardener myself, I was someone that always was worried that my plants were dehydrated, that they were going to wither and die. And so I found myself, especially indoors, that's where it becomes a real big problem. But it can also be a problem even in a greenhouse where you're coming back with water every single day, regardless if the plant needs it. And that can absolutely cause algae because, again, algae forms in damp environments. That's why, no matter what, if you have a kiddie pool and you leave water in the kiddie pool, or if you have, a pond that you just dug or whatever, the very first species of plant life that will start to take hold is algae, even in a kiddie pool. And that's because if you have water and you have things like sunlight to actually photosynthesize, they will thrive in that environment. And so what you're doing is you're basically encouraging algae to grow by just watering too frequently. And so the reason why that's a bad problem, the algae is not really a bad problem. It can be if it's left unchecked. The problem is that too much water is actually what causes things like root rot. And so the algae is really a symptom of overwatering. The problem is that you're going to end up killing your plants because eventually the root rot will take hold and the plants can suffer from that. Again, I go back to what I said in the beginning, that algae is kind of it's a clue, right? It's something that we can look at and visibly see that there's something wrong with the environment, right? The environment is hosting algae, and algae and plant life do not coexist, believe it or not. And so you want to make sure that you have an environment that's free of algae. And so if you're watering too frequently, I've always said, pick up the pot, make sure it feels lightweight, check the color of the soil, see if it's actually needing water. If your leaves are drooping, make sure that you give them some water. If they're always nice and firm and they're always plump and happy, don't give them more water than they actually need. And then also too, know your plants, because sometimes certain plants like to be kept drier for longer, like pepper plants, whereas something like a lettuce plant likes to be watered on a little more regular basis. So knowing your plants as well will help to kind of keep that thought out of the back of your mind of, oh man, I should be watering every single day, because a lot of times they don't need to be watered every single day. So like I said, algae and plant growth do not mix. In fact, they're polar opposites. A lot of gardeners make the mistake of thinking that one day they're going to wake up and magically the algae will just have disappeared. The problem is it doesn't just disappear. And if left unchecked, eventually it's going to kill your seedlings, which that really stinks. But you know what doesn't stink? The sponsor of today's episode, Farmish. Farmish is a global app that connects both buyers and sellers of locally grown agricultural products. And what I think is awesome about Farmish is the fact that if you do kill your seedlings, you can find farmers in your area carrying seedlings. Like in our area, there's 3 farmers, including us, selling seedlings. There's other farmers selling things like chicken manure, sheep manure, or even a guy about 20 miles away from here selling fly tying material from his quails that he's raising. That's freaking awesome. Farmish, like I said, is a really cool app. But it's not just cool because it connects both buyers and sellers of agricultural products. It's because it has a heartbeat for local, despite it being a global app. Like I can go on here and I can see what a farmer is raising in California or Florida, despite the fact I'm here in Michigan, which I think is awesome. But also the fact that if I wanted to go on there and buy something, I can go on and buy for free forever. It's free to use the app if you're just going to go on and shop and support local agriculture. However, if you want to sell something, like let's say you wanted to make a little side money and you wanted to raise some seedlings, you could have 3 free listings forever. Free. There's no charge. Just throw them up there and you can be making a little bit of side money. But if you want to take that to the next level and grow your business, you can get a market membership. The market membership is $29 a month or $299 a year. And so if you're like us and we have 140 different varieties of plants, you can list those for basically for the low price of $29 a month. And you're going to be having a market membership where you're basically going to be able to advertise to people in your area that might never have known you existed and actually help to grow your business, which I think is awesome too. So I want to thank Farmish for sponsoring today's episode. And if you're really interested in checking it out, which I highly recommend because it's awesome and we're on the app, which is great, you can go check out getfarmish.com/MIgardener and download the app. And like I said, send us a message and say hi. So, all right, thank you so much, Farmish, for sponsoring today's episode. And let's get back to it. All right, the next reason why you're having algae on your seedlings is because of a lack of airflow. Now, regardless if you're in a greenhouse or in a grow room, I've always recommended adding a fan. And the reason why is because a fan helps to blow air over your seedlings. And what does air do? It helps to evaporate water. And so it all comes back full circle to what I said in the beginning, which is that if you can reduce the water in a timely way, a fast way to get the water out of the soil, it's going to help to dry the soil out and you're going to reduce algae. Unfortunately, a lot of people just go without a fan and they say, well, let's see what happens. And when you say, well, let's see what happens, that well is algae. And you don't want algae. Mold and algae will absolutely kill your seedlings. And like I said, killing your seedlings is just the worst feeling in the world. We've all done it, but the simple way to reduce that is by reducing mold and algae, which I think is one of the biggest reasons why gardeners lose their seedlings over time. So I like to throw some box fans here in the greenhouse. That helps to really pump the air through. But even in a grow room, you can use just a simple little oscillating fan. I got a $5 oscillating fan from a garage sale. Thing works wonders. All you have to do is just blow the air on your seedlings. And a positive side benefit from doing that is it's going to help to strengthen the seedlings. The seedlings are going to have those micro vibrations, which is going to simulate wind. And then once you get your seedlings out into the garden, they're going to be better prepared for the growing conditions that are out there. Things like wind will exist. And if you have really weak, feeble seedlings, they're just going to crumple under the first wind. But if you have a breeze blowing over them, those micro vibrations are going to make them strong, stout, and a little more prepared for that. So throw a fan in there. It's really going to cut down on the algae. Humidity, not a great thing. When it comes to germinating seedlings, a lot of gardeners say humidity is key. And yes, humidity is really important. However, too much humidity leads to too much moisture, which leads to algae. And algae is what we want to prevent. And so if you have a greenhouse, vents are key, but also the fans help to get the humidity out. But also if you have doors, roll them up. The humidity in a greenhouse will absolutely lead to, I don't know if you can see that, there's a lot of water on that door. That's because all this moisture is moisture coming up from the ground, from watering seedlings, and it stays in the air. The problem is when that humidity is high, it doesn't allow moisture from the soil to evaporate as fast. And that's going to lead to things like mold and algae. And so you gotta get that humidity out of the air. But also, if you're in a grow room and you're using a humidity dome, we've done videos on this before where I've said, as soon as those seedlings germinate, get the humidity dome off the seedlings, because that extra humidity is what causes things like mold and algae, because of the fact it does not allow the soil to dry out. So, like I said, humidity, great things for seed germination, terrible once the seeds germinate. So get that humidity out, you're gonna really reduce your algae problems almost immediately. All right, so let's say all the preventative measures did not work and you still end up with algae. What can you do? Well, it's about controlling it now. And the reason why you want to control it is because as the algae grows and gets worse, it can actually start to set down roots. That's because algae is known as a pioneer species. And what it does is it grows in a thick mat. And that thick mat actually will hold moisture in the soil. It protects itself so it can actually grow. It's advantageous, just like you and I are. And so if you have algae growing, it's really important to snuff it out as fast as possible. And how do you do that? You can do that with sprays. There's one spray in particular that we turn to that's actually very effective, and I guarantee you have it around your house, and that's baking soda. A baking soda spray, a very simple baking soda spray, can change the pH of the soil, which algae is very sensitive to. You see, if you change the pH of the soil either more alkaline or more acidic, the algae will not be able to grow and actually colonize the soil. And so what I want you to do is, rather than turn for other harsher chemicals and harsher sprays, like, do not by any means use algicides. Do not use algicides under any circumstance. They are not organic and they are very, very harsh. What you can simply do is simply go with 3 tablespoons of baking soda to a gallon of water, add a couple drops of dish soap, and spray that around the soil. Try to avoid the leaves if at all possible, because these seedlings are pretty sensitive. I don't think it would kill them necessarily, but I'd hate for you to spray them and have that be the things that kill your seedlings. And so spray the soil around the seedling. And what that's going to do is it's going to change the pH of the soil very dramatically, very quickly, and it's going to cause the algae to either stop growing or die entirely. Very, very simple. Everybody's got it laying around their house, and you don't have to go out to the store and buy any super harsh chemicals to do that. So those are all the things that you can do to control and prevent algae with your seedlings. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. If you did, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, thank you so much, farmers, for sponsoring today's episode. And as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow bigger. Take care. Bye.